tell us how all this, the integration of mathematical sciences and in those areas like stats and analysis, how has that transformed the banking industry in respect to its decision making and risk assessment, and even where people like me come in, customer satisfaction?
Sure, thank you. I'm going to bring it back to the youth. I think banking is evolving rapidly, and I think Prof alluded to the fact that we're living in a digital economy. And I think what we need to remember is that the skills market has been heightened tremendously. So when you're looking at the youth, everything that we do is underpinned by maths. And I want to steer slightly away from some of the examples that were given earlier. I think when we're looking at it, even as a bank, we need to realize that your quintile 1 to 3 schools, it is an absolute imperative that we are able to augment the number of students that understand mathematics. So I think, firstly, the commitment that we have to the youth, or Gen X and the millennials, is to demystify what maths is in a fun way. I think there's lots of fear attached to maths, and that's why we're seeing the dismal throughputs coming from your early childhood development to your tertiary education and then into the workplace. So what we're doing, and I'm going to speak specifically to Standard Bank, is we are using youth, specifically through youth offerings like your graduate programs, your internships and learnerships, where we bring in specific qualifications. And at the moment, there's a very, very there's heaviness placed on your science, technology, engineering, and maths. And, there's maths in everything, in baking, in soccer, in regression models, in actuaries. So I think there's maths everywhere. So what we believe is we hire you for your problem-solving ability. And I think the concept of paying it forward, where we get youth to make other youth realize that maths is an absolute fundamental, it's a non-negotiable, and it's going to hold you in good stead for any career that you go forward in. So what we at Standard Bank do is we've also partnered with the South African Maths Foundation on the teacher development program, because I think what we're doing as industry, as well as in the higher education sector, is we're focusing on what we call downstream processes. And we need to start addressing the real problem. And we are faced with a situation where our teachers, and it's in the quintile 1 to 3, some of the quintile 4 schools, where the teachers they're capable, and yes, they don't have their PhDs yet, but we've got a current problem that we need to solve, and we need to start developing our teachers very, very intentionally. And what the private sector is doing very well is we are partnering with the likes of the South African Maths Foundation to help these teachers and to equip them, to teach maths. Now, with banking, I think there's lots on the go. It's absolutely rapid at the moment. And when we're looking at how we solve for value for our customers, we're wanting the youth to help us with that. Why? Because you come into organizations with a very untainted view of the world. And if you're looking at us sitting on stage here, that tells a very daunting story because, at the age group. So what we said is, rather let's bring in people, from university, because the way you address a problem, you'll come from the left field. You don't think like all of us sitting on stage. And you have the innate ability to start influencing and start shaping some of the issues that are important to you, like sustainability, for instance. All right? But what we're worried about in industry is that this pool is declining. Our maths pool is declining. And soon we're not going to have enough of a pool to actually feed even the private sector, even financial services for that matter. So we have to place more emphasis and we have to create great collabs. And Prof, you mentioned government. I think what's on the go at the moment, you have like the South African Graduate Employers Association with some of the partner sponsors that have brought industry together. We're looking at academia because there needs to be an evolution of how you're teaching, and you have to make it more relevant to the digital transformation that's happening and to skills that we require in industry. Why? Because we have a very high rate of unemployment. It's dismal. I think it's going to pass 6.3 million youth sitting unemployed at the moment. So we're trying to close that gap. We've been speaking to academia. They've been transforming what they teach and how they teach it. And coding, for instance, needs to be taught from primary school, not even from high school. So we're working with them, but I think the leg that's missing is government. And to the private sector, there's an appeal that if you're working, all of us work with the public sector, we need to start strengthening those relationships with government and pulling them in. And a critical thing that we need to do is the funding, the stats that you put up there. When it comes to the funding models that we're looking at, be it from government, be it from public or private sector, we have to be very intentional to grow that maths population. Because if we don't, our country is going to end up in a very critical state. And also, we need to look at mechanisms on how do we keep our youth in the country. Because you're going to see, okay, immigration is okay. But if you track the immigration stats, you get the likes of the UK and you get the likes of the US that are tapping into our youth pools, and they're going out of the country. And it's wonderful to get exposure and you become a global thinker, but we need to retain skills in South Africa as well. So I think there's a dire need for us to look at retention strategies when we're looking at our youth, to keep them in the country so we don't lose the strength of that STEM discipline pool. And I'll pause there.
But you mentioned the role of government. If you believe that the private sector is doing its part, how specifically would the government lead? Because when I listen to government officials, they're saying, we are doing our part, the private sector is not chipping in.
I think, okay, I believe the opposite. I believe private sector is chipping in. I think what's not happening very well, and a simple example, I'm going to bring it back home to South Africa. When you're looking at the universities, normally the universities will stake their, claim to fame to say, we've actually graduated X number of students. And I think we need to understand that there needs to be a transition from university into employability.
Yeah. Right.
All right? And I believe that the universities need to be held accountable in terms of actually articulating and monitoring the throughput of students that are graduating, be it from undergrad or postgrad, into employability. Because if you're looking at it and if you're looking to change the status quo of our GDP, the employability of that population needs to be monitored very stringently. The universities have an obligation, okay, because we're paying the fees that we pay are huge. But I still don't believe our academics are paid enough. I'm just
Thank
saying
you.
that. I'm just saying that because no, but we should turn a belly up, Prof. I'm very serious, because if you're looking at our educators and you're looking at our lecturers at university, and if you think about it logically, these educators are shaping the youth of our future in terms of technical ability, in terms of behavioral, right? And I personally don't think they're paid enough. So that's why that's the angle I'm taking. Now, just coming back to that, so I think there's an accountability to the universities. There's an accountability to private sector, from private sector to partner with the universities, okay, to help them where the shortfall is. There's an ownership in government in terms of, yes, there's enough funding, but I don't think that's been monitored stringently in terms of where is that funding going to. So if you're giving it to a particular organization, let's understand what that management fee, let's understand what percentage of that money is actually going to our youth. If we don't monitor that, I don't think we're doing it very responsibly.
Okay, so the incentive shouldn't just be output subsidy, you graduate 200 PhDs and you get an output subsidy. It should be, how employable are they? So your reward goes with whether the impact of your education leads to some economic impact as well, not just you have graduated. I get
one more thing. So, and it's a continuum, because then the people that are graduating with their PhDs, they need to be accountable for their output and throughput on the number of candidates that are passing, or students that are passing from your undergrad to postgrad into the workplace. And then we have an obligation, all employers have an obligation, to obviously monitor the output and the performance of the youth that are coming into the organization. So it's a 360 view that we need to take.
Or even by their research, Vanessa, make
by
sure
the
that you
research.
pay them for
No,
the
but
research
Prof,
that you will go. Anyway,
Prof, that 5 number is dismal, so we need
okay.
to...
Thank you very much. That's a very candid and very meaningful input.